Sexual harassment is certainly a societal kind of concept, I believe. I mean, I think if you start from those really young ages where it's okay to wolf whistle girls, girls play with dolls, boys play with cars. I think that, has a really big impact on the way that our society has grown up. The Harvey Weinstein example, and there's a number of others across the world. I think now what we need to be focusing on really is holding men to account. They need to be in view, and their behaviours really are seen as being, kind of predatory behaviours. Whether that is a wolf whistle, I mean, it certainly can start off at that lighter end, but it can quickly deteriorate. I think they need to be held, accountable. They need to be in view. They need to be called out. And we really need to be pushing back against those kind of huge, the masculine society. I think that's no longer applicable these days, and yet we're still takes an extraordinary amount of time to actually rechange our culture. If we just think of recent times, the police have had issues, CFA have had issues, the entertainment have had issues, our politicians of late, in terms of sexually harassing their junior staffers. It's clearly a massive issue. I think that organisations these days, from really big organisations to small organisations, need a range of things. They need really good education plans. They need policies and procedures to back up so people know what the rules are. And they also need a system to identify sexual harassment and then respond to it by providing support services or having access to a counsellor. So, on the whole, people who have been sexually harassed are females. And if we think about the entertainment industry as an example, the fear of actually coming out and saying that somebody has sexually harassed you, it's a very frightening thing, I guess, for a young female in terms of their role. Will they get the role? Will they be employed again? Will they be seen to being rocking the boat? But I think these days we're getting, far more aware of those issues. We only have to look at the recent coming out with, Harvey Weinstein, and then the backlash and the reaction from the females in the industry. I think it's certainly everywhere though. If we think about the Family Violence Royal Commission, which is kind of explicitly linked to sexual harassment often, or particularly sexual assault, the respect for women and the role that we're playing in the media is, the media plays in this is far more prominent. Certainly sexual assault, in terms of the scale of the impact on somebody, is normally far greater. There are lifelong consequences of, a serious sexual assault. So people often feel guilty. Do they feel like was it my doing? Did I bring that on? Am I partly to blame? There's a lot of embarrassment. And really serious sexual assault is a very, very traumatic experience for most people. If we don't get the right supports, if you don't get the right support services for somebody who has been traumatised, then there can be absolutely lifelong devastating consequences. And that's not downplaying sexual harassment as well. If you have repeated sexual harassment to somebody in terms of your confidence, your daily routines, your work, your relationships. So certainly if it's not spoken about and out in the open, and then people receiving the support services and the care they need, it's a really big issue. And I think one of the things often is that people have often thought that they won't be listened to, they won't be heard, they're making it up, they were partly to blame. Were they drunk? Did they drink too much? Were they flirtatious to the male? And we all know that that's nothing to do with sexual assault. Sexual assault is an assault, full stop. And I think that there are often situations where females particularly are in difficult situations. There's a lot of drinking, a lot of clubs, there's groups and activities that people are involved in universities. And I think that there are more opportunities, getting to and from university, often they're late nights and early mornings. I think that's also an issue. I think the rates are ridiculously high, and I think some of that in the past has been blamed on alcohol-fuelled parties. We no longer accept that because somebody's drunk that it's okay to sexually harass or assault anybody. People need to be responsible for their behaviours regardless of what the circumstances were. So yeah, I think certainly will shake up the university industry, particularly seeing they're growing our new leaders, growing our new workers. They've certainly got a huge job ahead, much like the rest of Australia. If we look at the Scandinavian countries, so Norway, Sweden, they have one of the lowest family violence rates and one of the lowest sexual assault rates in the world. And I think, from my point of view, there's a really clear understanding of why that is. They also have the most gender equal society in just about in the world. They have more women in senior positions, more women in politics and running companies. So actually that gender imbalance is really non-evident in some of those countries. So I think there's a lot of good best practice around the world that we can learn from. But certainly those Scandinavian countries, that's a very good example for us. I think one of the big changes that we've seen, which I think is very important, is to actually have particularly male role models, but also female role models who are famous, who are very clearly influential, particularly over younger people in our community. So I think it's very important to be looking up to people who have very clear stances on sexual harassment, sexual assault, treating people differently, whether that be on, their gender or their sexuality or their race or their culture. So I think that that's very important. I think the more people we can actually get to call out, the better. One thing I think, though, is underestimated, and we're just starting to learn more and more now, is the positive impact of particularly men calling out other men. So when you're out for dinner, when you're in those localised social situations, that has a far greater impact than a basketballer from America calling that out. So that instantaneous kind of, that's not okay, mate, it's not funny. Those type of conversations are certainly the much better way to be pulling people up, and people starting to realise, oh, actually, that might not be all right, I better pull my head in. So that's a really good positive move, and we've seen some good ads on the tally around that. I think that they will grow, but I think we need a balance. If we can come at this from whatever situation we can, whether that be through famous celebrities or just local work that's being done in the local footy club or the local gym, that's certainly the best way to go about it. It's a positive move. We're on the way. We've got a long way to go, but I think certainly over the last couple of years, particularly around sexual harassment, it's far more common to be called out. Victoria has just formed a new organisation called Respect Victoria. Their prime goal, amongst many things, is actually just to keep working hard on trying to rebuild that respect between the genders and ensuring that everybody has a fair go, and is treated fairly. I mean, I think that's the old Australian way. If we can get back to that, then we've come a long way.